This time, I would like to call to order the regular board meeting of the North County Transit District for June 15th, 2022. Before we begin, members of the public who may be viewing this meeting on the district's YouTube page should note that in order to make a public comment during the meeting, you must connect using the Zoom link provided on the agenda. In addition, you must register to speak by sending an email containing your name and/or phone number and the agenda item on which you wish to speak to clerk@nctd.org. Sahil Rodriguez, interim clerk of the board, will now call the roll.
Board Member Rodriguez. Board Member Hinsey.
Here.
Board Member Contreras. Board Member McNamara.
Here.
Board Member Desmond.
Here.
Board Member Gasterland.
Sorry, here.
Board Chair Edson.
Here.
Board Member Jenkins.
Here.
Vice Chair Patel.
Here.
Board Member Contreras.
Both board members Contreras and Rodriguez are here, but they're still as attendees.
Board Member Contreras.
Present.
Board Member Rodriguez.
Here.
Thank you.
Board Member Desmond, will you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? Board Member Desmond, we can't hear you.
Bummer. All right, I started over. Okay, go ahead. Okay, please join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank
Sorry
you. No worries. Thank you very much. Better twice than only once.
There we go.
Suhail will now provide a safety brief and review evacuation procedures.
In case of an emergency, I will dial 911. In case of an evacuation, please take the stairs. Do not use the elevators. Once cleared of the building, do not re-enter unless cleared to do so by emergency personnel. There are fire extinguishers and first aid kits on each floor of the building. There is a portable defibrillator on the first floor and staff on hand trained on CPR procedures if needed. This concludes my safety brief.
Thank you. Have there been any changes to the agenda?
Yes, Chair, there were non-substantive revisions to the board agenda and 2 staff reports. An errata sheet was sent to the board yesterday and revisions were posted to our website.
Great, thank you for that. Next on our agenda is public communications. Suhail, do we have any public comments today?
No, Chair, we do not.
Thank you. At this time, public registration to speak on this item will end. Before we proceed, I have a couple of quick protocol items to share. First, I ask that board members please hold comments and questions until after each agenda item has been presented. Second, when the time comes for board member questions and comments, please use the raise hand function and wait until you're called upon. We have 5 closed items on today's agenda. As a reminder to those participating remotely, you must connect via the second Zoom link to participate in closed session. Then at the end of closed session, you'll need to reconnect to the regular board meeting. Before we move into closed session, Suhail, are there any public comments for closed session items?
No, Chair, we do not.
Great. At this time, where public registration to speak on this item will end. Lori A. Winfrey, General Counsel, will now take us into closed session.
Good afternoon, Chair Edson and members of the board. We have 5 items for closed session today. The first 4 are pursuant to Government Code Section 54957.6 related to conferences with labor negotiators. Agenda items 1 and 2 are related to negotiations with the SMART Union as representatives of the coaster conductors and engineers. and the sprinter operators and train attendants. Agenda item 3 is related to negotiations with the Teamsters Local 542 as representatives of the sprinter maintenance of equipment technicians. Agenda item 4 is related to negotiations with the Carpenters Union as representatives of coaster maintenance of equipment technicians. Agenda item number 5 is authorized pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.9 sub D1 related to conference with legal counsel. And this is the matter of Pinkham versus the City of Carlsbad et al. And the board will now go into closed session for review of these items.
Thank you, Lori.
This is Priya. I just wanted to say that I'll be recusing myself from item number 5 due to a conflict of interest, since I am also a council member in the city of Carlsbad. So just wanted to at least mention that. But otherwise, yes, I'll be participating in all other items.
Suhail, will you please let me know when we once again have quorum?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
We have a quorum, Chair.
Great. Ms. Winfrey, are there any reportable actions from closed session?
No, as it relates to closed session items 1 through 4, the board received a briefing on the status of union negotiations, but took no reportable action. As it relates to agenda item number 5, the board received an update on the status of the litigation and provided direction to council, but took no reportable action.
Thank you very much. We have 2 presentations today. Chris Orlando, Chief of Planning, Marketing and Communications, will introduce agenda item 6. This item builds on last month's presentation from Deloitte. Chris?
Thank you very much, Chair Edson. As the board will recall, last month we received an update from Deloitte Consulting about the market analysis project that they are undertaking on NCTD's behalf. Today we will receive more information about the report. It's a briefer update, but it provides insight into the scenario planning that Deloitte is conducting on behalf of the district. And with that, I will turn it over to Ben Capano from Deloitte Consulting.
Excellent. Thank you, Chris, and thank you to the board for having us today. Next slide, please. So as Chris mentioned, we are on a journey with NCTD to identify strategies that will increase ridership over a 5-year timeframe. And as part of that, we're using a process called scenario planning. So scenario planning differs from forecast planning in that it factors in uncertainties to build optionality into our planning, rather than relying on our current understanding of current situation and then trying to broadcast that into the future to do our planning. So I think COVID showed that that it's difficult to take what you understand today and try to plan how things are going to go in the future, especially with some events like COVID that come around and really drastically change how we think about things and how we operate. So as part of this project, we've developed 4 possible versions of the future that we're calling scenarios, which are based on uncertain forces in the region, like work from home adoption, policy support for land use changes, funding available for transit, and cost of personal vehicle ownership, among many others. So we found that each scenario could have different implications for NCTD's approach to increasing ridership in the future. Next slide, please. So the 4 scenarios are created by identifying the uncertain factors for transit in North County that most affect transit ridership and viability of the service. So here on the slide, we have apologies, might be a little bit difficult to see here, but we have, there's really 3 steps in our process of identifying these scenarios. So the first was to collect a series of driving forces that are impacting the district. So as part of this, we reviewed data specific to North County around mobility trends and pressure on transit from competing modes, overall regional travel demand and the changes that have happened in recent years, and then just the overall national conversation around transit viability and funding. So looked at data sources from other agencies around the country and globally as well. So in step 2, we had this list of driving forces, which was probably around 50. So a lot of different things that can impact the way the agency thinks about the future. We then separated these into certainties and uncertainties. So certainties being, these are the things that we're pretty sure they're going to go this way in the future. Uncertainties being, look, there are several possible outcomes for how this certain factor could play out, and we don't know. So we're going to factor that into our development of these scenarios, and they're going to help kind of frame different versions of the future. So with this list of uncertainties, and at this point, we probably had around 30 of these factors. We did a half-day planning lab with NCTD stakeholders, as well as some leaders from around North County as well. So we had board member Contreras in that, where we asked for input from these leaders and the people that really have, the regional knowledge here to talk about what are the factors that most impact the way people understand transit and understand their transportation options, and what are the key things that determine how they make choices about which mode of transportation they choose. So over the course of this process and talking with leaders, we narrowed down, to the really key list of several uncertainties that are going to frame the way we think about this. And then we ended up down selecting to kind of the top 2 uncertain forces that, depending on the 2 possible extreme outcomes of each of these forces, they can form very different versions of the future. And if you put them on a 2x2, like we'll show on the next slide, these kind of frame our 4 scenarios. Next slide, please. I just talked through our process of how we got here, how we got to defining these 4 possible future versions of the world in North San Diego County. And on the screen here, we have that 2x2 I mentioned. So our scenarios are framed by these 2 uncertainties. Number 1 is trip demand and travel patterns, including commutes, as well as leisure travel and tourism travel. And that's on the vertical axis there. And then the second one is change in local land use and transportation policy, which we have on the horizontal axis there. So you can think of this as maybe the level of action taken to change land use and transportation policies in the region, understanding that both land use and transportation policies and also adjacent policies, not just relating to specifically public transportation, have a huge impact on how people choose which mode of transportation they take. So these were kind of the 2 critical uncertainties that the group came to, as if you look at the extreme possibilities of either of these and compare them against each other, you can form very different versions of the future. And that's what we have here. So I'll talk through each of our 4 scenarios. The first is what we're calling back to basics. So this is a scenario where there is a little action around changing land use and transportation policies. So maybe think about the existing status quo from a policy perspective, and then, but frequent travel patterns return post-COVID. So this might be a world that actually kind of looks something like, maybe pre-COVID 2019, where people are commuting on a regular basis, but there's a lot of policy in place that actually supports kind of personal vehicle use rather than kind of alternative modes of transportation. In the stay-at-home scenario, so bottom left there, this is where there's, again, kind of existing policy land use status quo is maintained in this. The difference here is that there is unpredictable and overall less travel occurring. So this is a world where COVID is one of the critical uncertainties here. COVID or other pandemics, maybe they persist in this scenario, and there's likely to be a larger number of people working from home in this scenario as well, and also just traveling less in general, right? So if you think about the leisure trips we take on a regular basis, those are happening less often in this stay-at-home scenario as fears of pandemic or other difficulties with being out in the world kind of persist. And one distinction I want to make here: stay-at-home doesn't necessarily just mean work from home. So work from home is a trend that we're seeing, obviously across the country and the world. And work from home could be a factor in all four of these scenarios. It's just to what degree is going to change in each. So in a scenario like stay at home, there could be a high percentage of people in San Diego County that are able to work from home, choose to do that. Whereas in back to basics, this is where people are getting back out in the world and resuming their normal commutes. So just want to make that distinction there. I'll move on to top right. So this is a scenario that we're calling robust rebuild. And this is a future where, kind of like back to basics, people are coming back to work again. The fears of COVID have kind of gone away, and people are maybe returning to more what we would consider more normal and frequent travel patterns. That's why it's on the top on the y-axis there. But then in this scenario, in addition to people returning to transportation, there's also an interest among policymakers and also developers and other stakeholders that have an impact on creating the environment of the county to change land use and transportation policies to in a way that would support alternative choices in transportation. So basically making choices to make it easier for people to choose either transit or other modes rather than kind of relying on single occupant vehicle use, which could have been the status quo pre-COVID. So that's an interesting scenario. And then the last one, innovating in a new world. So this is similar to robust rebuild in that policy or I guess the willingness to change policy for land use to better support transit is in place. So people are interested in looking at ways to fund maybe new technologies in transportation or new service models that make it easier for people to take alternative modes. So that interest is there, but similar to stay at home, people are traveling less, and possibly working from home adoption takes up a little bit more in this one than it would in robust rebuild or back to basics. So this is a world where maybe not as severe at stay at home, but less overall travel happening, but there's an interest in kind of finding a different way to serve the trips that are continuing to happen. So these are the four features of the world that we are seeing. And again, based on a lot of data that we've taken from North County, as well as a lot of input that we've taken from regional leaders. So next slide, please. So all of this kind of points to some impacts for NCTD, and you can imagine how there would be different impacts and implications for the district, depending on which scenario we're talking about. So each one could have a dramatically different impact on NCTD's ability to operate and attract riders to transit. So I'll start with back to basics. So here there's opportunity for NCTD to win commute trips and some of those evening and weekend trips that return as people are coming back to kind of their frequent travel habits. Stay at home presents some challenges. This is where there's overall infrequent, I would say less travel, and maybe allocation of local funding doesn't necessarily flow towards kind of, other ways to promote transit or to push people towards transit and out of their cars. So it makes it difficult to maintain frequent service and potentially even difficult to make customer experience enhancements as well in this scenario. So we see some challenges with stay at home. Robust rebuild is interesting. Big opportunity here to potentially win returning commute trips and new trips, plus maybe some more available funding sources and some more innovative funding sources to support transit innovation, and even potentially help NCTD integrate into kind of like a regional mobility as a service options as we see those potentially becoming more popular in a scenario like this. And then with innovating in a new world, there's limited commute trips and kind of non-peak or leisure trips as well, but the opportunity to get some or to explore new enhancements to the service and potentially new partnerships with regional players to find a better way to serve the trips that are still happening would be key for this scenario. So next slide, please. So the first two presentations that we've gone through, I think so far have really been to kind of set the stage for our project and also tell a little bit about what we see these future scenarios as being. And I think it's important to say this because the subsequent presentations that we're going to be doing are going to focus a little bit more on kind of the quantitative and qualitative results from our testing of these scenarios. So kind of next step in the project is we are using a tool that we have called Futurescape and to model each of these scenarios in two different ways. First, we are modeling NCTD's current strategies and network and policies and fares. So NCTD's current network in each of these scenarios 5 years in the future to see what the ridership numbers look like and how also services perform. So we're doing that round of simulation, and then we're going to be re-simulating with a different set of strategies, policies, network changes, potentially frequency changes, maybe some new services, new modes in place to see what kind of incremental change or increase in ridership could some of these new strategies have for NCTD. And then that's kind of what we'll go forward with in terms of, possible, substantiated recommendations for the district to really improve ridership in each of the four scenarios, kind of regardless of what happens. And kind of last thing I'll say on the scenarios is I know we've kind of laid out four distinctly different futures, but I think it's important to note that also, what could really come to pass in the next 5 to 10 years could be some sort of mix of the four. Some aspects of some uncertainties in one scenario might be kind of mixed with different things and different uncertainties that we see in another one. So this is really an exercise in kind of stretching our thinking to see, okay, what are the possible versions of what the world could look like and how we live our lives and go to work and go to school. And then, try to find some real strategies that we think can help the district provide better service and increase ridership in each of those four. So thank you, and happy to take any questions the board has at this time.
Thank you, Ben. I see Chris back up. I don't see any hands raised. Chris, do you have anything to add?
No, just was being available for board members. As Ben noted, this is the second presentation. I'm really trying to provide some insight into the lens we'll be looking through as we test these scenarios against both the current state and potential changes down the road.
Well, I really appreciate this work, and it's more knowledge is more knowledge, and it will only help us. Thank you very much. This is an information-only item. There's no vote required. Suhail, do we have any public comments on this agenda item?
No, Chair, we do not.
Okay, at this time, the public registration to speak on this item will end. The district is working on several strategies to increase ridership. These include rail frequency improvements, implementation of microtransit, and improving Breeze bus service speed and reliability. Katie Persons, Director of Service Planning, will now introduce Agenda Item 7, an update on the consultant study for improving Breeze bus speed and reliability. Katie, you're up.
Great, thank you. Today we've asked our consultant team to provide a presentation on our ongoing Breeze speed and reliability study. Next slide, please. For today's presentation, we'll hear an overview of the study and its distinct phases, followed by a debrief on the core methods within our existing conditions review and problem identification, and then finally an overview of the toolbox of strategies that are available to us. So before I hand it over to WSP, I'll give some context to the study and its goals. So next slide, please. And one more after that. There we go. So in partnership with SANDAG, NCTD submitted a funding request to the Caltrans Transportation Planning Grant Program and was awarded funding in 2021 to conduct the Breeze speed and reliability study. In the fall of 2021, NCTD, Caltrans, and SANDAG kicked off the project, which builds upon NCTD's past planning efforts and other local planning initiatives to help identify opportunities to increase the reliability and travel time competitiveness of NCTD's Breeze bus service. So Caltrans and SANDAG staff are key project members of our project development team for this study. Next slide, please. NCTD's Breeze network travels in mixed traffic and is especially impacted by changing travel patterns and traffic congestion, which influence on-time performance and customer satisfaction. So the goal of this study is to identify and prioritize opportunities to improve the speed and reliability of 10 Breeze corridors through the implementation of transit supportive infrastructure, technology, and policies. And through this effort, we're seeking to optimize the performance and safety of all travel modes and to help our local and regional stakeholders achieve goals for complete streets, multimodal options, and climate action plans. Slide. The study area consists of 10 of our breeze routes. These routes consist of a combination of our highest ridership routes, as well as corridors that are identified in other regional planning efforts led by Caltrans, Sandag, and local cities. So with this set of 10 routes, we traverse each city and parts of unincorporated San Diego County within our service area, which means that we have a diverse set of project stakeholders. And we'll talk a bit more about their participation later in this presentation. And so with that, I will hand it over to Pete Ricity, project manager at WSP.
Hi, thanks, Katie. Next slide, please. I'm going to talk a little bit about the process that we're following for this study. And as you can see in the slide taken broadly, the study occurs in 3 phases. And I see our formatting along the top got a little screwed up, but the intent was to show kind of 3 phases, a little bit overlapping really. So we started in the fall and we're taking a look at existing conditions, really trying to understand where the problems were on those 10 study routes. So to understand the those types of issues and what their background is. Moving into the second phase, which is kind of what we're doing right now, we developed a toolbox of best practices to improve bus service from taken from best practices from around the nations and from peer agencies, and really trying to match those toolbox strategies to the problem areas that we identified in the first phase. So that's what we're doing now. And my project team members, Carl and Emma, are going to go over just a little bit about what we're looking at there and kind of part of our methodology for that. And then as we move into the later phase, which will really start in the fall until the conclusion of the project in early 2023, is to take those strategies and really start to prioritize them and work with the local cities to develop ways to actually implement those. And the local cities have been a key part of this. We've been in lots of dialogue with them so far, and I think we're going to cover that as we get into the next slides. Can you go to the next slide, please? As you can see here, there's a number of subtasks that are really, kind of part of our workflow. The ones that are circled in yellow are really what we're working on now. At the kind of the end of the first phase there, interviews, we're really finishing up interviews with all of the local cities, with the bus operators, and with other stakeholders. As you can see in the center column, the speed and reliability toolbox, which again, we have developed based on best practices from around the nation, and then currently, we're working on the task 5.1, the strategy recommendations. So my project team is going to go over some of the details as part of our process so we can kind of get into some of the findings that we found so far. So next slide, and I'll turn it over to Carl.
Thanks so much, Pete. And hello, board members. Thank you for having us today. As Pete mentioned, I'm going to start by going through the speed and reliability evaluation work we're conducting. You can see the content on the right of what we're going to be covering here on this portion. Next slide, please. So the data that's informing the work for this study was collected from systems that are on the buses running today that measure both speed as well as on-time performance. So that data has been gathered. It was collected from both peak and off-peak periods during which the buses are operating. And as part of a future phase of the study, when we're analyzing the results for prioritization, we're going to incorporate ridership as well as other criteria to make sure recommendations for future investments are being made where they're needed the most. Next slide, please. So the data was used to create an index, and the index was a composite index of 2 different layers, a layer that took the speed information and mapped it, as well as a layer of the reliability information. And they were combined into a joint index that we call the Speed and Reliability Composite Index, or SRCI. And I'll talk through how these were constructed. Next slide, please. So the speed index is a combination of two data sets. The first is the raw speed information from the bus routes that I described was collected, and then also the difference between those speeds throughout the course of the day. So if a bus has a relatively flat speed throughout the day, it doesn't really have too many speed issues during operations. However, if there's a large speed differential during the day, for example, that could be an indication of peak period congestion or something like that we might need to investigate further. Next slide, please. The data that comes out of the index analysis is then essentially scored and ranked. There's a number that comes out at the end, and we provide a color coding to that to indicate if it performs well or less well on a red to green scale. Next slide. The reliability index is made up of the on-time performance data that we gather, and this is a pretty straightforward index that just says, is the bus reliably showing up when it's supposed to on its schedule or not? Also mapped and indexed on a red to green scale. Next slide. So combining both of those data sets gets us the composite index of speed and reliability data together, which has also been indexed and mapped on a red to green scale. Next slide, please. So this is just a snapshot. It's not supposed to be legible, but just to give you a sort of an order of magnitude of the work that's being conducted, and then was just summarized on those previous slides. What you can see here is just a subset of the 101 route on the inbound segments for a portion of that corridor. Overall, we've analyzed over 930 individual segments across both inbound and outbound paths for 10 routes that are within this study. So the list is quite a bit longer than this. And then left to right, we are doing first the speed analysis, then the reliability analysis, and then ultimately those get combined in the right column for the speed and reliability composite index score for each segment. Next slide, please. All of these segments have then been joined in GIS and mapped online in this data mapping tool that we've been using primarily to conduct not only geographic analysis, but also engagement. This has been really, really helpful both internally with the project team at NCTD and SANDAG, as well as our project partners and stakeholders in the community. Next slide, please. So as part of that, we've taken the map and the tool and the data out into those groups to do validation and engagement. Next slide, please. So this has involved ground truthing the analysis and making sure that we understand the context around what we're seeing from our desktop work. So making sure that we know what the conditions are like out where people are living and working and writing these routes, and knowing if the data is accurate or not. This includes interviews with both NCTD and MV operators and the management of those systems so that we can understand their experience and perspective, as well as feedback from our technical working group. We've convened a group of 14 stakeholder organizations and local communities that met as a group back in March. And we've had follow-up meetings with each of those organizations listed here on the slide to really dig into the specific issues and opportunities in their areas where routes operate that are relevant for this study, and had really helpful follow-up conversations with them. We're also going to be doing future outreach with community stakeholders that will help continue dialogues that have been started based on previous planning studies and pick them up that are relevant for this work. Next slide, please. I'll just briefly mention the key questions we're bringing up during these stakeholder discussions to help communicate what we're learning and better understanding from these conversations. So first off, we're trying to understand if the findings we see in the data are consistent with their experience in their local jurisdiction. And this has been a very helpful topic to go through. Related to that, we have them expand on any background they can share on more problematic areas we've identified in red or orange in our study, such as previous work that was done or projects or other priorities. And we've gotten a lot of value out of this question. A lot of the local cities have done a lot of local projects themselves to try and improve local conditions or take on things that are important to their communities. And that's valuable for us to know during this study so that we don't recommend an improvement that's already been implemented. Other things that we have inquired about include ideas or recommendations that our stakeholders have for potential improvements in these areas. as well as equity considerations they want to see being made in their analyses that are important for their communities. And then also, what other stakeholder groups do we need to engage? Are there folks that aren't on our list that we need to be talking to make sure we cover all our bases? Next slide, please. Now I'll be handing it over to my colleague Emma to talk about our toolbox and strategy recommendations.
Thanks, Carl. So next slide, please. So we've developed a toolbox with potential solutions to pull from to address the speed and reliability challenges that we've identified through the SRCI analysis, as Pete mentioned earlier. And so we really wanted to ensure that we have a thorough list of improvement strategies that's informed by demonstrated implementation and diverse thinking that really captures the best strategies out there. And so we looked at a comprehensive list of best practices, both academic resources and materials prepared by peer agencies. And so what you see on the screen here is just a sampling of what we've looked at. Next slide, please. And so based on this review, we divided the candidate solutions in the toolbox into 3 categories. And we categorized the solutions based on elements that local jurisdictions that own the streets can control. And so things like signals and traffic and street and stop design, these are things that cities can really take the lead on. And things like bus operations are more of NCTD's purview, but also cities do play a role in that as well. And so the guiding framework for these categories is really how can we approach this from the perspective of local jurisdictions, since they're the ones who do own the streets and would be implementing the candidate solutions. Next slide, please. And so there's a really great opportunity with this study to create solutions that have co-benefits. And so we're looking at bus improvement strategies that would really positively impact the broader transportation network and align with city values and help them reach their goals, since challenges that the buses are facing are really inextricably tied to those that other modes are facing as well. And so we're developing solutions with multiple benefits like multimodal comfort and safety, streetscape and facilities upgrades, reducing delays at congestion choke points, making transit a more attractive option for all existing and potential users, and helping cities achieve their CAP goals. And so we'd really like cities to recognize how the solutions will help them too, and see that these improvements really go beyond just helping transit. Next slide, please. So we recognize that SANDAG has a brand new regional transportation plan, and they are key partners in this study. And so they are a regional leader in new technology, and we're working closely with them to lay the groundwork for future planned complete corridors and future innovative technologies. Next slide, please. So we're developing strategy recommendations for each corridor, and that's what we are in the process of doing at the moment, as Pete said earlier. So we are synthesizing the SRCI analysis and developing candidate location-based solutions to improve the speed and reliability. In that process, we're identifying contributing factors to the challenges, strategies that could address them, and how they interact with existing plans. We're looking at segments grouped both by focus area and also corridor wide. And we're deliberately thinking of solutions that can lay the groundwork for potential upgrades to certain corridors that are identified in the regional plan, like enhanced bus, rapid bus, and BRT. And as we go, we will continue to evaluate and prioritize candidate solutions with stakeholders. And at this point, I will turn it back to Katie.
Thank you, Emma. So we're transitioning into sort of the second phase of this study through the rest of the summer, which includes the development of the toolbox of strategy recommendations and identification of potential improvements for each corridor while examining their community impacts. Into the fall and into early 2023, we'll work with our technical working group members and local stakeholders to prioritize those improvements and develop implementation plans. The study will ultimately arm us with a list of prioritized implementable projects that will allow the district to partner with each local city to identify funding for implementation of each project. And the study will also provide justification for local governments to seek funding for roadway improvements that will benefit active transportation, transit, rail, and automobile travel. And with that, time for questions.
Thank you, everyone. Katie, Pete, Carl, Emma, great presentation and very informative overview with regard to the study. Before I move to board member questions, Suhail, do any members of the public wish to comment on the on this item?
No, Chair, we do not.
Okay, at this time, public registration to speak on this item will end. And I see Board Member Contreras, hand raised.
Yes, thank you. I don't have any questions. I just want to make a comment, and I'm really thankful for this this process here because, you know, at the city level, it is really important to have more information to justify infrastructure, right? So I think I'm really excited to see where this goes. I saw my city of Vista, you know, has a part on a lot of those routes. So, you know, I just can't wait to move forward on this project. But thank you so much for all the hard work that has gone into this project thus far. And I look forward to seeing it move along. Thanks.
Thank you for those constructive comments. Board Member Gasterland.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for a great overview of where this is all going. You provided the bit.ly link to the GIS to do some exploring. And I'll note that it seems that all the red areas correspond either to kind of known traffic bottlenecks. For example, in Del Mar going north at 15th Street, there's a traffic light, and through the entire University of California, San Diego, it's red. And it seems to correlate there with an overabundance of usage of the bus. Buses just get so slowed down because of riders getting on and off. Are you going to be making recommendations? Sorry about the construction noise behind me. Are you going to be making recommendations about ways to get around traffic bottlenecks, ways to increase buses, and how will this kind of play out? What about express buses?
Yeah, hi there. Thank you, Mayor Gasterland. We are definitely looking at all of those things. That initial data analysis was kind of, for us to shine a light on the places where we want to look, and that was a first step. But really, the next step that I think was really more valuable was then we took that data and we met with each of the local cities, and we sat down with their planners and with their traffic engineers to really understand what was going on there, because we know the data only gave us a quick snapshot in time. And you are right that our main finding was most of those areas. If you were to take a Google map with the red, yellow, green of the peak period traffic, it would almost overlap perfectly with those areas. Because you're right, and I mean that shouldn't be a huge surprise, is that the largest factor we found is getting tied up in the peak period congestion. So that's a factor that we're looking at, but we also wanted to understand what else might be going on there. Are there any projects? And I think, we want to cast a wide net and capture every possible solution that might work. But we also know that then as we take those solutions to the local cities and we start to understand what their future plans are for certain roadways, certain intersections, what they've already done at those intersections, have they already looked at the signal timing? Have they already maximized the capacity there? We know some of those solutions may or may not be viable in each city. So we want to take a big list of solutions and then work with the cities to understand what is viable. So where it is, viable from an operations or a spacing standpoint to put in a bus lane, maybe at a key, choke point or a signal queue jump, we would certainly love to do that. And we will certainly recommend that. But ultimately, the kind of key where the rubber meets the road is working with those local cities to understand what they can help us implement, because they're the ones who own those signals and own that space on that roadway. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. And are you going to be looking at places where express buses might be able to really add to movement?
Yes, one of the key documents that we're using is the Sandag Regional Plan. So a couple of the corridors that we have are already outlined in the Sandag Regional Plan to become future rapid or BRT corridors. We are looking at the entire corridor, and if we see that there's an area where it's a corridor-wide problem as opposed to a specific choke point or a specific bottleneck, then it does make sense that potentially express buses might be part of the solution. But one other factor that has to be part of that too is a demand for ridership as well. Running a separate express bus service that only stops at certain stops, we would need to make sure that there's enough ridership to also justify that, type of service. But at this stage, we're putting everything on the table. And so if that's something that could help, and there is the infrastructure that could be in place to allow express bus service to run, I think that's certainly something that we would look at. Thanks.
Board Member Desmond?
Thank you, Chair. I guess one of the frustrating things for me throughout the presentation, I didn't hear any mention of housing or advocating for more housing around transit stops. I know that's difficult, but we're so spread out in San Diego County, and I know you're trying to get people out of their car, you're trying to get them into transit, you're trying to offer choices. But if we don't have the densities or we don't have the housing along some of these transit lines, that's going to be, I don't know where you're going to get the increased ridership from, because I do think a lot of people are going to be staying at home, and more people. I don't know, my 30-year-old software engineer son is working from home full time all of that now. And so I don't know, I think somewhere in the maybe in what gets presented or how you work with cities is we got to advocate for housing where the transit exists. So I don't know, I'm just kind of disappointed housing wasn't even mentioned.
So can I jump in on that? So
yeah, Matt,
yes. So housing is a major part of this, but not this particular study. So we provided some other presentations like the Sprinter development project, plus the whole portfolio of projects, Supervisor Desmond, where we're planning and actively engaged with the cities. This represents an overlay over top of this of where our top essentially 10 routes are. And so within that framework, we already know these are some of our better routes. The big picture of this is that we know that these 10 routes will stay. How can we make them faster? How can we make them more reliable? How can we reduce the travel time? How, when we implement microtransit, can we maybe reduce the number of stops? So the housing piece builds upon all of that piece. It's just not part of this specific study. It's in other studies that we have done. For example, the land use study that we did several years ago. So we're in total agreement with you, lockstep, that development and intensity of the density of development is really, really important as we move forward.
Yeah, because if you don't, housing costs are way, way, way too expensive here in San Diego County that we're driving people are actually driving in from further away.
Absolutely.
So if we can get, make housing sort of, well, you say it's in there, but, we have to, I think, advocate that we need more housing. And I think it's kind of killing, or not killing, but, solving two problems is if you want a more ridership, we got to have more housing near where the transit lines exist. So thanks.
Thank you for sharing your thoughts, Director Desmond. I see Director Hinsey.
Thank you. Yeah, so when I look at this, the problem area is specific to Encinitas and particularly the 101 route. We know that we have a problem at the intersection of Lucadia Boulevard and Coast Highway 101. And that's an area that's been identified in some long-term planning, regional planning by SANDAG for grade separation eventually. Will this study help inform a potential grant application for the city if we wanted to support that, we might be able to increase bus speeds with grade separation there?
The answer would be yes.
Great.
Okay, so thank you, Matt, for chiming in on that. Pete, do you agree?
Yes, certainly. As I think Katie mentioned, one of the major goals and outcomes of this project that we hope is that we will be able to add some oomph to future grant applications, so that if the city and NCTD can partner and on a certain piece of infrastructure, whether that's a grade sep or an intersection or a complete corridor or anything like that, this is kind of what we're hoping we were just in a meeting with the Vista folks, and they were talking about the Vista Transit Center and some of their plans for that and how they would really like to get the grant that they seek for that. And as an example, what we're hoping is that if, we can identify specific bus improvement solutions to help that we can then join them in a future grant application, so that there's the transit agency, maybe Sandag, and the city itself saying, this will help multiple modes. This will further regional goals for the corridor. This will help the bus service. This will help the city implement their plans. That one example from Vista, but I think that's a model that we're hoping to show for all the cities. And ultimately the cities own these roads. The cities own the signals, and we know the cities are going to have to be our partners in getting any of these things built. So we certainly hope this can help with future funding for sure.
Well, thank you. And thank you for backing up Matt's, fleshing out Matt's answer.
Chair, may I ask just a quick follow-up question?
I was going to ask if you were done.
So will we as board members have the opportunity to submit comments, like the importance that we feel for certain improvements like that one? I know that you mentioned there have already been some focus groups, but like how will you work with us to be able to incorporate some of those priorities?
Yeah, sure. We are open to any of those comments. This is our first time speaking directly to the board members. We've already met with the planners and traffic engineers in your cities, so they've helped us to understand some of the priorities and a lot of the future plans and projects that the cities have planned. But we certainly would like to get comments from you directly. We can meet individually, or if you'd like to submit anything written, if we'd like to maybe have us send you some of the materials. I'll work with Katie and with Matt to kind of find the best way to engage you specifically, but we're open to all comments. And I think the more we learn from the local cities, you guys are the ones who know the best. That'll help the study be better and help us come out with something that's actually able to be implemented in the end.
Wonderful. Yeah, I would love to participate in that capacity.
Thank you. Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah, and thank you for asking that question, Director Hensey, because I had a question about the TWG makeup, and I think that answer kind of that gave us our answer. And I also would appreciate, perhaps being provided with the same list of questions you provided to staff, because staff sometimes hears things one way or views things one way, and as electeds we hear from the community in different ways. So I think that I would certainly appreciate that opportunity. Board Member Jenkins?
Yes, I have a question about, there was a comment made about the cities controlling the roads and the signals and all of that. I think you have to be mindful that on some roads where the freeways are, Caltrans controls those signals on city roads and not necessarily the city. So I think you need to be aware of that as you try to strategize here. And then the other thing is some of the cities are going through general plan updates. How this might be a staff question, how is transit incorporated into some of that, or is it only as the specific plans come up for certain developments?
I will say, go ahead.
I was just going to note on the first question that Caltrans is a key project partner, and I was oversimplifying a bit when I said the cities own the streets. For sure, where there's interaction with the Caltrans freeways, including the 5 and the 78, we are definitely working with Caltrans. Some of those freeway ramp intersections are some of the key problem areas, and are some of the areas that we are hoping to be able to work with Caltrans to be able to optimize the operations and timing of some of those intersections. That is one of the major tools in our toolbox, and we're already engaged with Caltrans on that. And I'm sorry, Katie.
Good luck with that.
Thank you very much. We love working with Caltrans. They're great. And I'm sorry, Katie, go ahead, please.
And I'll just add that studies like these definitely give us that opportunity to kind of partner up with staff as those plans come up for update. We're trying to be a bit more proactive in advocating for transit through kind of development reviews and studies like these. So I think it's a work in progress, but we're definitely Really thankful to have this individual time with each cities for this ground truthing exercise and to help kind of keep transit at the table for a lot of these corridors when we're talking about building out corridors in the future or changes that may come up. And we're certainly open to kind of more of those one-on-one conversations with cities and with city councils, and I think that would be really beneficial to this project. So would really love to have that opportunity.
Thank you, Katie. Great questions from the board, great answers. Really appreciate what you guys are doing. And Board Member Jenkins, your question with regard to Caltrans or your mention of Caltrans impact, I hear you. The main street in my city runs, is bisected by I-5, and it is very much impactful to our traffic flow. So I think that a project like this will also inform Caltrans. It gives us something to work, a tool to work with, as it is a toolbox item. I think will provide us with a tool to work with those partners. So I think this is a kind of win-win situation. Mr. Tucker, I saw your camera was on for a bit. Did you have something to add?
I'll just repeat what Katie said. Just the offer is to any city council, any board member who wants us to bring this presentation to their city council or subcommittee. We're more than willing to do that. We think this is very beneficial. And we do hope, Board Member Jenkins, Board Member Hensey, that the city councils and the Public Works Department specifically will take out these plans and incorporate them in their larger plans in terms of improvements to the transportation network within their communities. But I think if we can enhance the awareness and the opportunities for collaboration, and especially receiving grants that will support multimodal improvements, I think it's a winning formula for everyone.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. Katie, Pete, Carl, Emma, and Matt. This item was also informational with no vote required. Next on the agenda is approval of the minutes from the May 19th, 2022 board meeting. Sahil, do any members of the public wish to comment on the minutes?
No members of the public, Chair.
Okay, at this time, public registration to speak on this item will end. Are there any questions or comments from the board? Seeing no hands raised, may I have a motion to approve the minutes of the regular board meeting of May 19th, 2022?
Contreras
Jenkins.
moves to approve.
Okay.
Jenkins will second.
Motion by Contreras, second by Jenkins. Please call the vote.
Vice Chair Bhat Patel.
Aye.
Board Member Gasterland.
Aye.
Board Member Hensey.
Yes.
Board Member McNamara.
Yes.
Board Member Rodriguez.
Yes.
Board Member Desmond.
Yes.
Board Member Jenkins.
Yes.
Board Chair Edson.
Yes.
Board Member Contreras.
Aye.
On the motion of Board Member Contreras, seconded by Board Member Jenkins, to approve the minutes of the regular board meeting of May 19, 2022, motion passes.
Great. There are 11 items on today's consent agenda. Suhail, have any members of the public requested that any consent items be pulled?
No, ma'am.
So at this time, we're ending the public registration to speak on this agenda item. Are there any board members who wish to pull any consent items? Seeing no hands raised, I will move to approve the consent agenda. May I have a second?
Contreras seconds.
Okay, I hear Contreras second. Suhail, please call the vote.
Vice Chair Bhat Patel.
Aye.
Board Member Gasterland.
Aye.
Board Member Hensey.
Yes.
Board Member McNamara. Board Member McNamara. Board Member Rodriguez,
Yes.
Board Member Desmond,
Yes.
Board Member Jenkins,
Yes.
Board Chair Edson,
Yes.
Board Member Contreras,
Aye.
And McNamara is yes. Sorry, I screwed something up.
thank you. On the motion of Board Member Edson, seconded by Contreras to approve consent items 8 through 18, motion passes.
Next, we have 4 other business items. Karen Tukolsky, Chief Operations Officer Support Services, will review item 19, a presentation regarding a memorandum of understanding with the County of San Diego for the provision of law enforcement services.
Chair, Supervisor Desmond here. I'm going to have to recuse myself. I already voted on this item at the Board of Supervisors, and so I'm going to go off and I'm going to log back on, and I'm going to do it via the phone instead of Zoom. So thank you. I have to recuse myself on this one.
Thank you for letting us know. With that, Karen?
Karen, you're muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right. Thank you. And again, good afternoon. I do have my voice back, so I'm glad you could not hear me because I was muted and not because I lost my voice. So you can go ahead and switch to the next slide, Suhail. So I want to start off with just a little bit of background about our security program. So we currently have agreements with 3 different law enforcement agencies. Our primary agreement for law enforcement services is with the San Diego Sheriff's Office. And under that agreement, we have 9 dedicated FTEs. We have 1 sergeant, 7 deputies, and 1 administrative clerk. Our deputies are able to provide services throughout the entire jurisdiction, and so it's really valuable to us because, as you know, we have a lot of territory to cover. So that current agreement is set to expire at the end of this month. Next slide. In addition, we also have agreements with both Oceanside and Escondido Police Departments. Those agreements are a little bit different than that with the deputies. Those agreements are specific to officer patrols at the Oceanside and Escondido transit centers, and they are filled by officers on a voluntary basis picking up overtime details. These agreements also expire at the end of this month. Next slide. So based on current security trends, which I know everyone's aware of just in terms of increased activity on our modes and throughout the facilities, we are seeking to enhance our law enforcement services and have the opportunity to provide more robust, proactive approach to our security program. So based on that, we are not seeking to renew the agreements with OPD and EPD. Rather, we are seeking to transition those fiscal resources over to the Sheriff's Deputy Agreement to fund increased staffing via 3 new dedicated deputy positions. So again, this isn't an increase in overall dollars. It is just a transition of existing dollars from one area over to another area in terms of the agreements. So that would be effective this new fiscal year starting July 1, 2022. And as I mentioned initially, our deputies are able to travel throughout the entire service area. The local police officers only have authority within their own jurisdiction. So we believe that there is significant benefit from having these additional resources on our deputy team, really enabling them to move throughout the system and respond to incidents anywhere that they arise and provide that law enforcement presence that we need at the transit centers, on board our vehicles, and throughout our area, really promoting a proactive approach to our security program to help provide that safe and secure environment that our passengers and our employees should have on our system. Next slide, please. So the County of San Diego Board of Supervisors did vote to approve this modified agreement at its meeting on May 24th. And under that agreement, we would move up to 12 dedicated full-time equivalents 1 sergeant, and 10 deputies, which is that addition of the 3 new deputies that I mentioned earlier. And we would continue to have the resources of the administrative support clerk as well. Next slide. So the staff recommendation before you is to authorize the executive director to finalize and execute a new memorandum of understanding with the County of San Diego for the provision of law enforcement services with the San Diego Sheriff's Department for a 5-year term with concurrence of general counsel in an amount not to exceed $22,500,000. And with that, I am open for questions.
Okay. Thank you for the presentation, Karen. Sahil, before we go to board member questions and comments, do we have any public comments on this item?
No, Chair, we do not.
Okay, at this time, public registration to speak on this item has ended. Do any board members have any questions? Board member Contreras?
Yes, thank you for the recommendation and the information. You know, as we continue to move closer to our goal of more ridership, and as we expand our ridership base, possibly include more students, so those who are younger, as we look to just grow our services, security is incredibly important. However, I have requested that there's a little bit more information given. I just want to utilize, the Sheriff's Department, like you said, in a proactive way. However, I want to ensure that the public space, that individuals have a good experience, and that there isn't, different issues that could arise when we increase security. So that's something I look forward to getting a little bit more information about in the future. But outside of that, thank you very much for this information.
Thank you. And I know we have the opportunity to provide information in the future, but just a brief overall comment. Our team of deputies they're absolutely amazing. If you've ever had any engagement with them, they're very warm individuals, and they genuinely care about our riders, the customers, everybody that they're encountering on our system. And they are very different than what I've seen in a lot of other organizations in law enforcement. And I assure you that we will continue to work with them to continue to promote that truly positive experience and making sure that everybody knows that they really are there to help and that they don't have a negative perception of them there.
Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. I see no more questions. I support staff's recommendation. It's very important that we provide the best level of safety and security for our ridership possible. So thank you for bringing this. Let's see. May I have a motion to approve this agenda item?
Jenkins.
This is board member. Oh.
Motion by Jenkins. It would help if you this is raised hand, did thumbs too with motions, because otherwise we talk over each other, and I don't. It's hard for me to understand who's making the motions in the seconds. So motion by Jenkins.
And Bhat Patel seconds.
And second by Bhat Patel. Seal, could you please call the vote?
Vice Chair Bhat Patel.
Aye.
Board Member Gasterland.
Aye.
Board Member Hinsey.
Yes.
Board Member McNamara.
Yes.
Board Member Rodriguez.
I'm going to abstain.
Board Member Desmond.
Board Member Desmond abstained as well. I believe he actually recused himself. Sorry.
Board Member Jenkins.
Yes.
Board Chair Eston.
Yes.
Board Member Contreras.
Aye.
On the motion of Board Member Jenkins, seconded by Vice Chair Bhat Patel, to authorize the executive director to finalize and execute a memorandum of understanding with the County of San Diego for the provision of law enforcement services with the San Diego County Sheriff's Department. Motion passes. Board Member Rodriguez, abstain.
Thank you. Let's see. Next item on the agenda is item 20, a request for approval of the Pronto Extend Pilot Fare Program. If approved, this program will provide free fares to former foster youth ages 18 to 24. The Youth Opportunity Pass, which recently began providing free fares for those under 18, has been a tremendous benefit to the youth of our region. And it has also been a great way to introduce a whole new generation of riders to transit. I'm pleased to share that staff has worked in collaboration with MTS to extend this opportunity to former foster youth. Unfortunately, many former foster youth struggle with transportation once they age out of the foster care system at age 18. Chris Orlando, our Chief of Planning, Marketing, and Communications, will now present an overview of the program for the board's consideration. Chris?
Thank you very much, Chair Edson. First slide, please. As Chair Edson noted, as the board knows, in May we launched the Youth Opportunity Pass in conjunction with SANDAG and the county and MTS, and it's the region-wide program for free fares for those 18 and under. As we were working through the implementation of that program and working with community-based organizations, one of the areas that was identified as perhaps a gap in that program were foster youth who reached the age of 18 and either transitioned out of the foster care system or chose to stay within the foster care system. And so we started a conversation with MTS and with the county to extend the Youth Opportunity Pass and the free fares on transit to this group of individuals to give them assistance in their transition from foster care into more independent living. So that's how the program got started. So next slide, please. So there are about 5,000 young people currently in the county of San Diego's foster care system. That's all age groups. As I mentioned, as they exit and transition out of foster care, one of the challenges they face is transportation. And they no longer have that support system, either financially or logistically, that they had within the foster care system. And so transportation becomes one of the areas where they face a challenge in terms of making the transition to independent living. So as noted, we collaborated with MTS with the goal of extending the free fares to this group. So it would cover ages 18 to 24 of individuals who've been within the foster care system and either are still after age 18 who are still within the foster care system or who have transitioned out of the foster care system. Next slide, please. So this is an overview of the program. As I noted, it's ages 18 to 24. And it would provide free transportation throughout the county of San Diego. It's a pilot program for an 18-month period. If the board were to approve it, it would start July 1 and extend of 2022 and extend through December 31 of 2023. As part of the program, the participants, eligible participants will have access to either an MTS monthly pass or an NCTD monthly pass. And if they travel between throughout the regions, they would have access to both passes if that was a needed benefit for them. Next slide, please. MTS will administer the program and application process. So there will be an application process for this program. Eligible individuals must meet some criteria. So they have to be the right age and they have to have the proof of eligibility through the county foster care system and valid identification. So that program will be administered through MTS as part of their program management of the Pronto fare system. The application can be done through our website, through the MTS website, in person at the MTS transit store, or through the mail. So there's lots of ways that individuals can apply to receive this fare. Next slide, please. The program is consistent with board policy number 20, which allows for the distribution of passes to promote the general welfare of NCTD service area. So it is consistent with that board policy. Next slide, please. We will be working hard to promote this new benefit as we did with the Youth Opportunity Pass. So we'll be doing lots of outreach with both within the foster care community and also community-based organizations. We're working on employee training and awareness to make sure our frontline folks are aware of this program, both at our customer service offices, as also on the various modes. Our website will have the information about this, about the program. We'll be doing media outreach, social media, all the typical things we do to promote. This is obviously a very targeted community, so we will be working primarily through the county and the foster care system to make sure those that are eligible are aware of the program. Next slide, please. There is no dedicated funding for this program at this time. The financial impact of this FAIR program is unknown. And the reason is we don't know at this point how many participants will take advantage of the program and what that ridership level will be. The administration of the program is within the Pronto system, so there is no added cost. It fits within as an added tariff within our tariff table, and so the program can be administered within the Pronto system. So there's nominal cost to implement. The financial impact would be solely from any potential lost revenue of those taking advantage of the program. We will, during the course of the pilot program, we'll monitor the usage of the passes and then be able to provide reporting on what the impact is. The board is being asked to approve the program because in the event that it does exceed the $200,000 threshold consistent with board policy number 19. And so we wanted to go ahead and give the board the opportunity to approve the program in the event that we determine the fiscal impact did exceed $200,000, which would have been the threshold within board policy number 19. Next slide, please. So the requested action is to approve the Pronto Extend program, which is a pilot fare program to provide free fares to former foster youth and ages 18 to 24, and those foster youth 18 to 24 who are chose to extend through the foster care program from the dates July 1st, 2022 through December 31st, 2023. And that's the presentation.
Well, thank you very much. Suhail, do we have any public comments on this item?
Yes, Chair, we do. We have one public speaker.
Please call the speaker.
Mr. Brad, are you with us?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. You have 3 minutes.
Great, thank you. Good afternoon, board members. My name is Zachary Brott. I'm an associate regional planner at the San Diego Association of Governments, and I'm also the deputy project manager for our Youth Opportunity Pass pilot program, which, as Chris mentioned, provides free public transit to all youth 18 and under throughout San Diego County. And I'm here today to offer Sandag's support of the Foster Youth Fare Subsidy Program, this Pronto Extend pilot fare program. Throughout our outreach for the Youth Opportunity Pass program, we've been in contact with several agencies and organizations that assist foster youth in their day-to-day lives and necessities, as Chris mentioned as well. One of the major concerns that they've voiced to us is that the youth age out of the foster system at age 18 and therefore lose access to many of the resources that they need. By providing transportation to these young people through age 24, we can allow them to commute to job opportunities, pursue higher education, and improve their social lives without an additional cost burden. This is a logical extension of our equity-focused programs, and Sandag is happy to support NCTD as well as our partners at MTS in their provision of this program as we work to make our transportation system more affordable and accessible to everyone throughout San Diego County. And we look forward to continuing our work together to identify long-term funding for our equity-focused planning. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Zach. Before I call for questions and comments and a motion, I'd like to offer this bit of hope and positivity. I'm very excited about this program. I think it's a wonderful opportunity for youth in our region who may have a tough time. So I'd like to offer this bit of hope and positivity. My hope is that if approved, the Pronto Extend program will open a world of opportunity and bolster the lives of these really special young people. So with that, I see Board Member Contreras hand raised.
Yes, thank you. This is just a long time coming. I'm so glad that we're able to, I, for one, want to approve this. So hopefully there's a consensus for approval. But, I just want to say that to give you all an example, here in the city of Vista, we have a drop-in center that's a collaboration between North County Lifeline and Just in Time for Foster Youth. And I can't think of a better way to promote equity and to really, just help those who have had so many obstacles in their lives. So I'm so ecstatic that this is a conversation that we're having and that we have the ability to utilize public policy to help others. And I hope that this pilot program goes well. I do want to ask, I heard that there might be some issues, and what I was hearing from the presentation, that there might be some issues calculating an estimation of what the population might be in San Diego County. Did I hear that correctly?
No, it was referencing how many foster youth would take advantage of the program and what that ridership might be.
Okay, so we have a good idea of the population size.
Yeah.
And so it to me, the data is going to be really important to see what the utilization rate is, because I feel like the utilization rate, if it comes in low, it means that we're not doing a good enough job of outreach. And I want to know how we can do that outreach. Are we going to these drop-in centers, right? There's just so many ways to promote this information. So I really look forward to rolling this out and getting some more data on it. But thank you so much. Since I have the floor right now, I'm going to make a motion to approve Pronto Extend. But thank you. This is incredible.
Thank you. And thank you for the motion and the comments, both. Chris, we have other partners or other agencies that are also committed to making this happen, right? And can you explain who they might be and what their role is, with regard to Board Member Contreras's ask about outreach?
Yeah, no, great question. So first and foremost, we're working closely with both MTS and SANDAG. MTS in their capacity as the program manager for Pronto. I should have mentioned in the presentation that the MTS board had the same item before them earlier today and approved the item. So they've approved the program. And then we will work with SANDAG in regard to not only promotion and through their contacts with community-based organizations in the region, but also long-term understanding as the pilot gets some data, how we might extend it beyond the pilot date and what changes might be needed to be made to the regional fair ordinance, those sorts of things. So we'll work closely with both of them. Also working very closely with the county and the county foster care system. That's the primary touch point for obviously for the folks who will be eligible for this pass. So working very closely with them. And then of course, community-based organizations, as Board Member Contreras mentioned, those are really the folks on the front line, working directly with the youth who might benefit. So all of those will be part of the outreach.
Terrific. Thank you for that additional information. I see Board Member Gasterland's hand raised. I have a feeling she might be seconding this motion.
Yeah, I'm happy to second. And I just have a couple clarification questions. So second the motion. And so the pilot program for youth is ages 18 and under. So the 18-year-olds are kind of double covered here, yeah?
Yeah, and that was intentional because the pilot programs have different start dates. We wanted to make sure no one got lost in if one pilot program doesn't go and
right.
It does. So we wanted to make sure we captured them. So that's why it's a little bit of overlap there.
Great. And is NCTD and or MTS going to have presumably this is not so many people, in the hundreds or in 1,000 children. Will there be a person at NCTD who's kind of will be the primary point of contact if these kids need any, just to give a sense of humanity to it?
Yeah, no, that's a great suggestion. We haven't identified a particular point person, but certainly through our customer service, we will make sure, we've been working closely internally to make sure our customer service agents are well versed on the program. And if anyone should call in and have questions or challenges, we help them through that process. As noted, it's administered through MTS, so the actual application to become eligible will be handled through MTS, but certainly our customer service agents will be knowledgeable about the program and able to help folks if they have any challenges.
Yeah, and maybe I missed the number. Is it in the number of hundreds of kids, of youth, or is it?
Yeah, that's accurate. Number of hundreds, because the 5,000 number is really all youth in the foster care system. So the number that ages out each year or is in that cohort of 18 to 24 is a subset.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. I know that Board Member Desmond has rejoined us on the phone. I'm not sure whether or not he has any comments. I believe you're unmuted. Do you have any comments?
No, I'm good. Thanks, Jewel.
Great. In that case, Sunil, please call the vote.
Vice Chair Bat Patel.
Aye.
Board Member Geslin.
Aye.
Board Member Hinsey.
Yes.
Board Member McNamara.
Yes.
Board Member Rodriguez.
Yes.
Board Member Desmond.
Yes.
Board Member Jenkins.
Yes.
Board Chair Edson.
Yes.
Board Member Contreras.
Aye.
On the motion of Board Member Contreras, seconded by Board Member Gasterland, to approve Pronto Extend Pilot Fare Program to provide free fares for former foster youth ages 18 to 24. Motion passes.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Over the past several months, our board and board committees have received a number of presentations to support the development of the budget and related documents being presented today. Last month, Yoon Park Lynch, our Chief Financial Officer, provided a detailed presentation that allowed board members the opportunity for final inputs into the draft budget before it was released to the public. Today, Yoon is back before us to provide a summary review of the budget and related documents for approval under item 21. Yoon, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, board members. Today, we come in front of the board to conduct a public hearing and final adoption of our proposed fiscal year 2023 operating budget, as well as our 23-27 capital improvement program and the related documents, and also approval for the fiscal year 2023-2032 service implementation plan. Next slide, please. As our board chair mentioned earlier, in the last few months, the board and committees have received multiple presentations providing an overview of the proposed operating budget and as well as the capital budget. On June 1st, we posted the budget documents for public review at our website, as well as made those documents available at our administrative offices and our multiple transit centers. Today, NCTD has not received any comments on our budget documents. Next slide, please. The deliverables that will be approved today are listed in this slide. Next slide, please. The proposed fiscal year 2023 operating budget remains the same as it was presented to the board back in May 19. We have not changed any of our assumptions for revenues or expenditures. We continue to have a balanced operating budget that totals $170.2 million. Our operating budget reflects the in-house transition for the train operations and rail maintenance that is taking place at the end of this month, as well as the transition for the signal maintenance of way and facilities maintenance that would take place in late of June next year. The payment for the pension unfunded liability, as well as printer debt principal payments, will be made from net assets. In this page summary, we illustrate our balanced operating budget. As I mentioned earlier, our total revenues and our total expenditures will total $170.2 million. We also wanted to provide an overview of the next 5 years. NCT is required to adopt a balanced 5-year plan. And within this 5-year forecast, you can see that we are able to achieve a balanced operating and capital budget for the next 5 years. This table represents the summary of the constrained capital improvement program. The detailed listing for the projects that will be funded in the next 5 years are provided within our budget document. They are, and the forecasted expenditures for this coming fiscal year will total $55.3 million. Also within the documents that we are requesting approval from the board is included the employee classification and compensation schedule. The classification compensation schedule provides guidelines for multiple positions within the district. There are different roles and that are within each of these pay grades. And for this year, we have updated our classification and compensation schedule and adjusted by 4.73% compared to last year. And that percentage was based on the Consumer Price Index as published by the California Department of Industrial Relations. Also, we are requesting approval from the board for the cost recovery schedule for this coming fiscal year. The cost recovery schedule represents the fees that we charge to third parties for reimbursement of certain services such as right-of-way entry, review work plans, incidental use, etc. By law, NCTD can only charge costs that are for cost recovery, meaning that these are for actual costs incurred. And when it's related to staff time, those are based on actual staff time work on the different tasks at their fully burdened rate. Finally, we are also requesting approval of our 10-year service implementation plan. The SIP is required under the Master Memorandum of Understanding with SANDAG, and it's also used to inform our annual operating budget process. Within the SIP, ridership estimates were based on trends on a mode-by-mode level, and considerations were made to as far as different patterns on commuting, schooling, as well as operators' labor availability. The details of the service plan as well as our full SIP document are posted on our website, and they're also included as an attachment 21D to this agenda item. So requested board action for today is to close the public hearing on the proposed fiscal year 2023 operating budget and the fiscal year 2023-2027 capital improvement program. And we are requesting the board to adopt the proposed fiscal year 2023 operating budget and fiscal year 2023-2027 capital improvement program. Also to approve the proposed fiscal year 2023 employee classification and compensation schedule. Approve the proposed fiscal year 2023 cost recovery fee schedule, and approve the proposed fiscal year 2023-2032 service implementation plan. Next slide, please. And I am available for any questions.
Thank you, Yoon. Suhail, before we move on to board questions, do any members of the public wish to comment on this item?
No, ma'am, we have no public speakers.
Great. At this time, public registration to speak on this item will end. I see no board member hands raised. This has been a robust process, and I think that everyone has had ample opportunity to ask and have their questions answered. So with that, may I have a motion to close the public hearing and approve agenda item 20?
This is Bhat Patel. I'll move that recommendation.
Okay. Second?
This is Terry. I'll second.
Okay, motion by Director Bhat Patel, second by Gasterland. Please call the vote.
Vice Chair Bhat Patel.
Aye.
Board Member Gasterland.
Yes.
Board Member Hinsey.
Yes.
Board Member McNamara.
Yes.
Board Member Rodriguez,
Yes.
Board Member Desmond,
Yes.
Board Member Jenkins,
Yes.
Board Chair Edson,
Yes.
Board Member Contreras.
Aye.
On the motion of Vice Chair Bat Patel, seconded by Board Member Gasterland, to close public hearing and adopt the proposed FY 2023 operating budget and the proposed FY 2023 to 2027 capital improvement program, approve the FY 2023 employee classification and compensation schedule, approve the FY 2023 cost recovery fee schedule, and approve the FY 2023 to FY 2032 service implementation plan. Motion passes.
Thank you, Seal. Laura Cote, Chief Administrative Officer, will now review item number 22. Laura?
Thank you, and good afternoon, Chair and members of the board. This item is asking you to consider the option of holding virtual meetings through July 16th per Assembly Bill 361, or to consider resuming in-person meetings in accordance with the Brown Act beginning tomorrow. Next slide, please. So as mentioned at prior board meetings, Governor Newsom signed AB 361 into law in September of last year, which modified the provisions of the government code related to teleconference public meetings. This bill is in effect until January 1st of 2024 and allows local agencies to hold meetings virtually so long as state or local officials have declared a state of emergency, or those same officials continue to impose or recommend measures to promote social distancing. The governor has removed many provisions of the state of emergency thus far, however, has yet to terminate it altogether. So I'd like to just review a few of the statistics that I often share during these discussions. The latest statistics related to our region are that as of last week, more than 800,000 COVID-19 cases have now been reported in the San Diego region since the start of the pandemic. And this is information we received from the County Health and Human Services Agency. As of June 9th, which is the last day that data has been posted, the positive cases among tests reported is now 10.9%, and the average daily case rate is 38.5 per 100,000. This places the County of San Diego in the category of, quote, high transmission, according to the Centers for Disease Control levels of community transmission. Regarding NCTD, North County Transit District, I sent out an email to all of you earlier this week with an update that we are currently operating under COVID-19 outbreak protocols for the main offices here at 810 Mission Avenue until at least tomorrow. One other item I want to note before I close is that should the board continue to ratify the state of emergency, we would need to hold a special board meeting currently scheduled for July 12th, since the proclamations are only able to extend 30 days at a time, and our July regular board meeting is more than 30 days from today. That does necessitate a special board meeting again before that time frame. Next slide, please. So the recommendation before you today is to consider one of two alternatives noted on this slide. Adopt resolution number 20-12 proclaiming a local emergency, re-ratifying the proclamation of a state of emergency, and reauthorizing remote teleconference meetings, including hybrid meetings of the legislative bodies of the North County Transit District in compliance with Assembly Bill 361, effective June 17th, 2022 through July 16th, 2022, or resume in-person meetings in accordance with the Brown Act, effective June 17th, 2022. That does conclude my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have at this time.
Thank you, Laura. Sahil, are there any public comments on this agenda item?
No, Chair, we do not.
Thank you. At this time, public registration to speak on this item will end. Are there any questions from the board? Seeing no hands raised, I would move that, and considering the unfortunate uptick all the way around, I would move that we adopt resolution number 22-12 proclaiming a local emergency, re-ratifying the proclamation of a state of emergency, and reauthorizing remote teleconference meetings, including hybrid meetings of the legislative bodies of the North County Transit District in compliance with Assembly Bill 361, effective June 17th, 2022 through July 16th, 2022. Director Gasterlin?
Yeah, I will second, and I'll second based on the continued rise in hospitalizations that we are experiencing. So second.
Thank you. I saw Board Member Contreras' hand up for a moment. Was that a race to second?
It was, and I lost.
Okay.
I'll give it to you, Karina.
It's all good. You take it.
Thank you, Sahil. Motion by Edson, second by Gasterlin. Please call the vote.
Vice Chair Bhat Patel,
Aye.
Board Member Gesterland,
Yes.
Board Member Hinsey,
Yes.
Board Member McNamara,
Yes.
Board Member Rodriguez,
No.
Board Member Desmond,
No.
Board Member Jenkins,
Yes.
Board Chair Edson,
Yes.
Board Member Contreras, Board Member.
Aye.
Thank you. On the motion of Board Chair Edson, seconded by Board Member Gasterland, to adopt Resolution 2212, reauthorizing remote teleconference meetings effective June 17, 2022 through July 16, 2022. Motion passes. Board Member Rodriguez, no. Board Member Desmond, no.
Thank you, Sahil. Next on the agenda is the Executive Director's Report. Mr. Tucker, do you have anything to report?
Yes, ma'am. A couple of things. First, I think every year for staff, one of the major milestones in the year is the approval of the budget. Things seem to go easier for the remainder of the year once the first half of the year's activities have taken place. So very much appreciative that we've reached a milestone with the budget. I want to report to the board kind of the continued challenges with filling the bus operator positions. We should have 292 employees to support Breeze, Lift, and Flex service. We have 49 vacancies as it exists today. I think in the month of July, we will probably have an agenda item to talk about some our future plans or recommendations from staff to the board about the bus operations contract. We are continuing to work with our contractor on looking at what we can do from a wage and benefit perspective to attract more qualified candidates that can successfully navigate the process and become an operator. It's a significant ongoing challenge for us. It's something every day that we work on, but we're not making the progress that we need to make. The market has shifted dramatically all around us, and our wage package is significantly out of step with what other transit agencies in close proximity have done. So we'll talk a little bit more about that in detail next month. Just wanted to make sure that was on the radar screen. The other item that I wanted to mention is over the next 60 days, the Federal Railroad Administration will be releasing a notice of funding opportunity for the grade separation program. It's a $600 million annual program. I think it's really important for the cities and the county to be tracking the release of that notice of funding opportunity. And there will be an opportunity to provide some input before the final grant requirements are developed. I've had extensive discussions with FRA, a multitude of projects, including Kelly, for example, grade separation projects in the city of Encinitas or in the city of Del Mar potentially would be ripe applicants for submission of grants under that program. So I wanted to make sure I shared that information with you all. That completes my report, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. I see Board Member Gasterlin's hand raised.
I want to make a real plug and pitch for our bus drivers as I sit here with my 101 bus background. I meet these bus drivers. I've gotten to know some of them at least by face, and they know me. They have a terrific responsibility with riders and with people getting on and off, revenue, following things, enforcing rules. These are real professionals. And I'd like to see us as a transit agency really being at the vanguard for thinking of our bus drivers as well-paid, properly paid professionals. So I look forward to this item coming forward.
Thank you for those comments, Board Member Gasterlin. Are there any board member reports at this time? You're back up.
I'm just using that hand today. I wanted, is it okay, Chair Edson?
Yes.
Okay, great. So what I want to convey to this board, so Chair Edson, Director Jenkins, Director Hines, Priya, Director Bob Patel, and let's see who else is still here, Karina, Director Contreras, and Chris Rodriguez, Director Rodriguez. What I want to convey words that I'd like to be heard as cooperative and constructive. NCTD has cooperated on much needed crossings with every other North County jurisdiction, really with every member city, including the Coast Boulevard Wayside Horn here in Del Mar. And it's now time for a much needed pedestrian overpass crossing, if an overpass is the right way to do it and not an at-grade, in Del Mar. And I want to just remind us of the lay of the land. For 2 miles along the Del Mar Bluff, from Powerhouse Park, south past Carmel Valley Road to the Penasquitos Lagoon, there is no way to get to the beach for 2 miles without crossing the track. Like Del Mar Bluff, the railroad tracks run for 2 miles through Solana Beach. Solana Beach has 3 pedestrian overpasses plus 2 sidewalks on the Loma Santa Fe Bridge to get from one side to the other. Like I said, Del Mar has none for 2 miles south of Coast Boulevard. You have to go all the way, if you want a formal way to get to the beach, it's the sidewalk right next to the lagoon from Highway 101. So what Del Mar is asking for is 1 crossing now and another in the longer run. And this is going to mean cooperation. NCTD, Del Mar, Sandag, and the Coastal Commission has said they will help with the CPUC. And last week, the Coastal Commission required that Sandag design, build, and pay for a crossing, 1 crossing at either 7th or 11th, as mitigation for burying 49,000 square feet of sandy beach behind seawalls on the toe of the bluff, along the toe of the bluff. And this includes coves, real beaches that are going to be behind the seawalls after the Phase 5 bluff stabilization project. A pedestrian overpass at 7th Street makes a lot of sense. You could enter it from street level, more or less, at the Upper Bluff Coastal Trail, which is at least 35 feet above the track. And it can be exited at the other side, which on a broad bluff top and trail above the ocean. That's the simplest version of what's needed to do something along this 2 miles. So imagine one of your Solana Beach overpasses at 7th Street in Del Mar. If we could clone it, I would do it right now, maybe with a 3D printer. But an overpass at 7th Street would solve a lot of problems and make a lot of sense. Many of the problems that we've been discussing, for a few years now here at the board. So I wanted to put that out there and plant the seed that that's the vision. So let's go for it. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing your comments, Board Member Gasterland. I will say that my city and Encinitas and Oceanside all paid for their own improvements. So, it's a collaborative effort to get things approved, but it's the funding that is important. So.
Right. Well, that's where Sandag's really important. There's $8.4 million of sand mitigation, and that has to be paid. That there's 49,000 square feet of high tide sand that's going to be behind this wall.
And
So,
I assume that you will be speaking about this at Sandag as well.
absolutely.
All
So thank you, Jewel.
You're welcome, of course. Sahil, do we have any remaining public speakers?
No, Chair, we do not.
At this time, for the final time today, we will close public registration to speak on an item. Our next scheduled meetings are the PATH Committee, June 30th, 2022 at 11 a.m., a special board meeting, July 12th, 2022 at 2 p.m. Our regular scheduled board meeting, July 21st, 2022 at 2 p.m. This meeting is adjourned in record time, 4:07, you guys. We're getting better at this. Thanks.
Yeah, we started early.
Yeah, well, yeah. All right. Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Have a good one.
You too.